Okay, so in this activity we're going to learn how to use a light sensor to be able to detect lux values. Lux values is the intensity of light striking a certain area. And we have a little tiny light sensor that we're going to use. It's called a BH1750 sensor. And it's going to require us to have a couple of new parts. So let's go through what we're going to need that's going to be new for this, as our wiring is now starting to get to be a lot of wires. So we want to make sure that we have everything straight. So we're definitely going to need some lights. These are going to be our LED grow lights. These actually can be fairly bright, and this is what's going to help our plants to grow. You're going to need the BH1750 sensor, and it's a little tiny sensor, and it also has a special wire. It's got a 4-pin wire that's small on one end and it's bigger on the other side, because you're going to have to plug it into something called an I2C hub, and this is going to also connect to our OLED screen. Okay, you're going to need an extra wire for your OLED or for your I2C hub, and you're going to need an additional relay to be able to turn on and off your grow lights. Okay, and so what I want to do is go through a quick wiring, and then we'll go through the code and we'll redo the wiring again at the end of the video just to make sure that we have it. So if you have your screen plugged in, what we're going to need to do is unplug it from our I2C port. We're going to plug in our hub, and it doesn't matter where you plug it in as long as the hub is plugged into the I2C. Then you can take your screen and you can plug it in, and then you're going to take your little light sensor, and it's very small on one side, and again these plugs, they only go in one way. So once you get it plugged in, the light sensor will plug into the hub, and it doesn't matter where you put any of these wires into the hub, it will automatically detect the sensor. Now our relay is going to be plugged right into P8, which is right underneath our I2C connector. And then just like our fan, our lights have a power connector. It plugs into one side of the relay, and then the other side of the relay plugs directly into the power that's on our shield. And once you have all of this wired up, now it looks kind of messy, right? But we've done it in parts to make it easier. Everything is ready to go for your greenhouse. This is all of your sensors for the very base functions that we need to control our greenhouse. Right? Our LED is in P0. Our temperature and humidity sensor is in P1. Our relay that controls our fan is in P2. Our light sensor and our OLED screen are attached to the I2C port, which is through a hub. And then the relay that controls the lights is in P8. And that's everything that we would need in terms of wiring up. The only other thing we will need is power, and to make sure that the right program is on our microbit. So now that we have a sense of what it's going to look like at the end, let's go look at our code. Okay, so for our code, we're going to need to create a couple of new functions. What we're going to do is we're first going to create a function for controlling our LED grow lights. So let's go on ahead and make that. I'm going to move my file out of the way here a little bit. And this is the same file that we were using to control our fans. Right? So if you don't have it, you can re-download it again. Because we don't want to just start from scratch, because we've already got all the work done basically to get everything up and running. So let's make a function. I'm going to make a function, and I'm going to call this control LED grow lights. Right? Because it's going to do exactly what we think it's going to do. It's going to turn on and off our grow lights. Okay? There's my function. Okay. Now I want to make another function, because we're going to have to get data, right? We're going to have to get the reading of the lux value or the light level off of my sensor. So let's make another function here, and let's make this function, and I'm just going to call it, say, get lux. You know, Just like our get air data, this is getting our light data. Okay, and again, lux is nothing more than the amount of light shining on a certain area. Okay, so now there's my function for get lux. Okay, so now I've got my two new functions. Now the other thing I'm going to need is I'm going to need to create a couple of variables, right? I'm going to need a variable to store the information from my sensor, and I'm going to need a variable to compare against. Okay? So let's go back, scroll up to our variables block. I'm now going to make a variable. I'm going to call the first variable lux. This is going to be the variable that's going to store the light reading from my sensor. Okay, and there it's made. I'm also going to make a variable, and I'm going to call it low lux. Oops. Low lux. This is going to be the variable that's going to be the minimum light that I need to make sure that my plants are going to be okay. So if the light level is below that, I want my lights on. If it's above my low lux value, I don't need my lights on. So why waste the energy? Okay. So let's make the global variable first, which is our low lux value. I'm going to drag that set low lux value, and there's a range for lux values. Plants are happiest if they have a minimum of 3,000 to 5,000 lux. If you're out in the sun, you're going to be getting about 25,000 to 50,000 lux. You know, kind of depends on how many clouds are in the sky. So let's just set this value initially to say 5,000. Okay. So that's going to be your minimum. Okay. The higher the value, that means probably less likely that your lights are going to come on. Okay. Now, let's create our function. Okay. So getting our data. So here's our function for get lux. Okay. We have a new block called the BH1750 block. And we're going to need to use basically everything that's in this block in our get lux function. Okay. So let's click on that. Okay. So what we're going to need to do is we first need to turn on our light sensor. If you don't have this turn on block, it's going to say off. So we want to make sure that it's on. Okay. Now, this set address, since we are on the I2C hub, there's lots of different locations that the microbit will be looking for the sensor. We're going to look for it on a spot called 35. Okay, so that's what we're going to look for it at. So we can just set that, keep it as the default. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to set my lux value, right? And now I want to get the data. So I've turned on my sensor. I've told microbit where to look at it. Now I need to read the data. So I'm going to set lux to, and for my BH1750, I want to get my intensity. Okay? Because again, we're measuring how intense the light is at a certain location, hence the get intensity.